Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today it's time to talk about some big news that came out yesterday regarding the UFL Players Association. Now, the Players Association is something that is kind of a hot topic to a lot of people in a sense that some people really do like having a players' union or a players' association for the players, and a lot of people don't like them having it. And we have some big news about it, so without further ado, let's get started by talking about the kind of just brief history of the players' union, as it looks like it might be over or at least put on hiatus for now. So the USFLPA was what it originally was, and in 2023 they formed the first ever CBA for a spring football league. Now, it was a massive success in terms of doing what their goal was, which was getting the players paid more than the XFL players were getting paid. They got a huge increase from $4,500 per week to over $5,300, which beat out the XFL's $5,000 per week, though the XFL had bonuses. But the USFL also saw a huge increase in their salary to inactive players, gaining $1,000 more than they did the year prior. Now, other things like a housing stipend of $400 a week also happened, the $5,000 bonus for players who win the championship. And something that didn't end up happening was the roster size change. But in addition to the CBA, there was a bunch of benefits thrown into the deal, like retirements, training camp housing, education programs, and all that. So there's a lot of benefits to the USFL players that happened because of the USFLPA. Now, after the USFL had the whole, merger with the XFL to the UFL, during that time, another deal was implemented. Now, this is the deal that was supposed to be for the 2024 season. Now, when you compare it to the year prior, some things had almost no change. Yes, there was another salary increase per week, but it went from $5,350 to $5,500, only a $150 increase. But considering the fact that the UFL had absolutely no reason to give even the slightest salary increase to any of these players, this was still a big thing to see happen, as especially something like the camp salary being increased by $150 a week was nice to see. The camp roster being increased to 75 players was pretty big. And then other things as well, like there's certain bonuses that also happened, right? And certain other things. The active roster size did increase to 42 players. We did see player appearances go from just 150 to 150, 250. Accolade bonuses happened, though we'll get to one of those later. Then, of course, things like a severance fund got added, a first fine decrease, different athletic trainers and all that, and a few other stuff, camp injured reserve pay scale being increased. There was a lot of other stuff that did happen that really did help the players in a good amount of ways. As, again, we were seeing stuff actually happen because of the UFLPA. And this is something that some people didn't like and some did like. Now, the reasons for not liking them or hating them were all basically just union stuff. People who are anti-union, people who like unions. A lot of people believe that unions cause businesses to fail. Other people believe unions are there to protect the people involved. It's a whole thing that, it's a can of worms that a lot of people open. But for a player perspective, the PA was a massive success in granting benefits that increased year after year, despite there really being no reason for that to happen, especially heading into the UFL. But there was one issue. Of course, you had the issue of the Player of the Week bonuses. The Player of the Week winners were supposed to receive money every single week, naturally, if you won Player of the Week, and that didn't end up happening. Now, the agreement was that the player bonuses for the all-UFL team would be added, but from everything we've heard, they didn't add essentially the amount of money that would have been given to the players of the week, essentially, right? They didn't give 10 weeks worth of player of the week bonuses into those. So, it did suck, but it is kind of what it is. So, this was the one big issue that happened. But this did show that the UFLPA, or the United Steelworkers Union, who the PA is represented by, didn't necessarily put their foot down in really any way, shape, or form. And this is what kind of opened the door for what ended up happening now, which is that the USW is withdrawing from the UFL. Now, the overall statement reads, the United Steelworkers has informed our player membership of their petition withdrawal. Unfortunately, they will no longer serve as our bargaining agent. We are thankful to have had the protection and representation by a historically trusted union with a successful track record as the first professional sports league branched under the USW. We are able to have a strong voice on the table on behalf of our players, gaining more benefits from year one to present. The USW was brought to us by former players for a reason, and we appreciate the Steelworkers' service throughout the duration of our first CBA. Now, the second paragraph is where it's a big deal, as we urge players to take caution and make an informed decision when choosing representation going forward. The UFL player membership should run a professional search and confidential background check on any newly organized union, posing as united to persuade players who cast deciding ballots. It is unnatural for any organization to obstruct the growth and preservation of player benefits of their self-elected personal gain. This is certainly not a meaningful application of players helping players. Despite these circumstances, we will always believe it is better in an established union. Now, some people are speculating that the United being in quotation marks is because there is like a United Players Association or a United Football Players Association or something like that I talked about in like a short and a video like a while back, which obviously nobody really wants them to join. But what's important to note is that how certain guys have reacted to this. Vadley and Chris Rowland, both who were on the board, pretty much made it seem like it's done. And a lot of people have seen that the UFLPA might be over. Yes, they're still technically potentially going to find representation, but it's a question mark of are they for sure. Now, this again has brought up the takes from like AJ McCarron, who back in late January basically was complaining about the UFLPA, saying that it was a bad thing. Like, the quote, y'all jumped at the first union that came in front of y'all signed a bad deal. Now, this is one of the things where it's just objectively not true. AJ McCarron is saying that from the perspective of an XFL quarterback who don't have the real right to say how a bad deal is, because XFL QBs were getting paid different than every other player. They were getting paid extra money. And the fact is, I've always been against that in the sense that we've seen these leagues need to spend as little money as possible, and routinely the guys who get paid the big bucks don't perform. Just look at 2020 XFL. The big-name quarterbacks didn't perform all that well. Then, of course, Brett Hundley was the big one. He got paid, I think, the most of any quarterback, and he ended up being terrible. So, yes, to an XFL quarterback who was already making more money, yeah, it sucks, but to the average player, seeing increases is good, especially when you have no reason to increase. Again, the UFL, in theory, should not have paid even a single penny more than what either league was paying the year prior. They had all control. There was no benefit of, well, it's competition, keep the best players. Yet they still increased a bunch of salaries. Yes, the Player of the Week bonuses suck, but it is what it is. Now, as an overall sense of what this is and my thoughts on it, if you're viewing this from a player perspective of protecting players' rights, this is very bad. Having a union protects the players a lot. It provides a potential benefit of increased salaries and just overall safety if something bad were to happen. Now, from a league surviving perspective, it's actually good that the union is gone in a sense that you're not going to be forced to keep increasing salaries year to year. Look, adding like $100, for a weekly bonus might not sound, or a weekly game check might not sound like a big deal, but a 10-game season, that's $1,000 per player, right? $1,000 per player. If you have, for instance, if you just average it out to increasing inactive salaries as well to 50 players per roster, right? You're talking about a sizable amount of money. You're talking $50,000 per team. You're talking about an extra $400,000 per year. So when you say even just $100, that's a huge increase across everything. We've already talked about, the overall amount of money they might be raking in from stadium deals or, attendance. So $400,000 would be a huge increase, and that's from just increasing the active and inactive salary to just 100 higher. So yes, it is a big deal to not have increased salaries year after year after year. So in that regard, it does provide the league more sustainability, as there's more of a, they're not going to be forced to spend more money on players every single year. So it's definitely a hot topic that I can see the argument for both sides. For the players' protection and the players getting benefits, you want them to have a union, or at least somebody who represents the union, as a union that doesn't have representation is, just kind of there. Whereas from the league's perspective, you're not having to deal with the issues of having to constantly shell out money. But of course, the one thing I will say is that overall, this is some more bad press in a sense for the UFL. Of course, in recent weeks, we've had the whole Dwayne Johnson U.S. Army situation. We've had the Showboats GM and coach basically step down, resign, whatever you want to call it, as Dennis Polian really probably retired, and then DiFilippo did part ways. So it's a lot of negative headlines. As whether or not you like a union or not, this is still a negative-sounding headline. So hopefully with the NFL preseason going on, we'll see some of these UFL players stick on, keep going on the rosters and get some more good press for the league, like Adrian Martinez's Jets preseason game, but we'll see. Overall, this has been Dom Fox. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are on this whole situation. Again, I had a community post come out earlier today about a fantasy football league that I'm going to be managing for this NFL season. If you want to join that, go to the community tab. There's a link on like the first post you'll see about it. And if you've been a fan of the channel for a while, think about becoming a channel member. You get exclusive team emojis, an exclusive monthly video that's not about the UFL but is a sports-related video, as well as other benefits. And as always, guys, have a great night.